Alright, Unit 6, Skill 8, factoring and long division combined. So how can we factor a polynomial if one root is given? And that's the idea here we're going to do today. So we want to pause it, copy that down again. It's how can we factor a polynomial if one root is given? So the example looks fairly straightforward, not too much to it. It says factor and find all roots, and one root has been given. Well, when that one root has been given, and typically this is a little nastier of a question, you can't factor it to start. So your end game here, your goal here is you have to do a little bit of long division since you have a root. And since we have that x equals -5 as a root, we know that a factor is going to be x plus 5. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide all that nastiness by x plus 5. Come on. So x plus 5, and we're going to divide it out. X cubed plus 6x squared minus x minus 30. So, long division again. It's more fun in practice with long division, and then we will end up doing some more. So what are we going to multiply the x by to end up with x cubed? Well, that's obviously just going to be x squared. So we'll put an x squared here. That gives us x cubed. And now we're going to have to take that same x squared multiplied by the 5, so it becomes plus 5x squared. Again, we're going to have to subtract here. Nobody likes subtraction, so we're going to add the opposite. Okay, the x cubes cancel. 6x and a -5x makes a 1x squared. We're going to bring down the x and ask ourselves, how can we multiply to get x squared? Well, I'm just going to multiply by an x. Alright, it's going to be a positive x to get to x squared. Then we have to multiply the x again by the 5. So that's going to give us plus 5x. Again, we'll draw our line here. Move the page up a little. And again, nobody really likes subtraction. Doesn't really work so well. People mess it up. So we change the sign, scribble that out, make it a minus sign. We have x squared and x squared canceling, a negative x and a -5x makes a -6x. Okay, so we're going to drop down, last but not least, the -30. Hopefully this works out. What are we going to multiply x by to get to the -6x? Well, a -6. That gives us -6x. And -6 multiplied by the 5 gives us -30. Yay! Okay, so in a question like this, okay, when you're doing all this, you want 0. In fact, if it's a problem where it says factor, you're supposed to be able to factor, that means you're supposed to get a remainder of 0 because x plus 5 is a root. It says it right here. X or -5 is a root, so x plus 5 is a factor. I'm sorry, I misspoke there. So since -5 is a root, x plus 5 is a factor, which means the remainder has to be 0, or you screwed up. Don't screw up. So what does that mean now? Well, we cheated this question. We made it a little bit easier. We made a problem that was impossible for us to just factor using factoring methods that we know. We made it factorable. So, and this works on problems where you could factor anyways. If you know one root, you're good to go. So I have x plus 5 as a root, and I have what's left over right up here. This is my other root, or will give me the rest of my roots. So, come on, move over. X squared plus x minus 6. And now we have it. All of this should be set equal to 0, alright, to find the roots. So x plus 5 can be set equal to 0. That's pretty cheesy, pretty easy. That's going to give us x equals -5. Who would have thought we'd get x equals -5 as a root when they specifically said it, right? So that's something that you should know. It's something that should just happen. The rest of it is going to be some factoring. Alright, let's add and multiply. What adds to the 1? Come on. It multiplies to -6. Alright, it's going to be 3 and 2. We have to have a plus 3 and a minus 2. So x is going to equal -3, and x is going to equal 2. And now we have our answers in no specific order, -5, -3, 2. And those are all the roots. Alright, now keep in mind it says find all the roots. Even though one has been given, you should still list it because it is a root, and not listing it implies that you don't think it's a root. So I see people do this all the time. They're like, well, I already know that one, so they just write these two. Don't be that person. Makes us cry a little bit when we have to grade a Regents exam like that. It hurts. All right, so example 2, Factor and find all, ooh, that's just bad, all roots, one root has been given. So they're saying f of negative 3 is equal to 0. So when we see this bad boy right over here, f of negative 3 equals 0, what does that mean? Well, that means there is a root at negative 3. So negative 3 is a root. It's the ordered pair negative 3 comma 0. All right, your x comma y. So that means x plus 3 is your factor. So we're going to divide all that nastiness by x plus 3. Don't forget we're going to have the placeholder here of plus 0x squared plus 6x minus 9. Just makes things a little bit easier. Alright, so we're going to get to the multiplying. So we have to multiply to get to that x to the 4th. So we have to multiply the x by x to the 3rd. And that's going to give us x to the 4th plus 3x to the 3rd. Now we don't like subtraction, so we switch the signs and then we add. People don't mess up. First part right here adds to 0. This is going to add to negative x cubed. Bring down the plus 0x squared. We're going to have to get to x cubed that's negative, so we're going to multiply by a negative x squared. That's going to give us negative x cubed. And then negative x squared times the positive 3 is going to give us minus 3x squared. Again, we don't like subtraction, so we add the opposite. All the signs cancel, and we end up with 0 plus 3x squared is 3x squared. Bring down the 6x. Multiply to get to our 3x squared. We have to multiply by a positive 3x. So it's plus, come on. So plus 3x. So it's going to be a positive 3x squared and a positive 9x. Again, we don't like to subtract, so we add the opposite. So we make that a negative 9. The positive 3x squared and the negative 3x squared cancel. 6x and negative 9 makes negative 3x minus the 9. And to get x to become negative 3x, we have to multiply the x times negative 3. That'll work. So that's going to give us negative 3x minus 9. Again, we don't like to subtract, so we add the opposite. All the signs are the exact opposite, so when we add them, we get 0. From there, we need to find the rest of the roots. So we have x plus 3 is now a factor because the remainder was 0. And now we have to copy what's left up here in blue. So we have x squared, or x cubed, minus x squared, plus 3x minus 3. The reason I put it in brackets is because this is kind of a nastier example. All right, this has a factor by grouping in it. So to find the rest of the roots, it should be set equal to 0. I'm going to have to put that over here. I don't have enough. Maybe I do have enough room. Sorry, it's something's not right. Apologize, guys. So equals 0. Alright, so we set each part equal to 0, but we have to factor it. So the first part's pretty easy. The second part, unfortunately, is factor by grouping. So I have two different parts here. I can take out and do a GCF. So that GCF will be x squared from the first part right here. And I'm left with an x minus 1 in the second part right here. I'm going to take a 3 from both things. It's a positive 3, so we write plus 3. When we take 3 from 3x, we're left with just the x. We take 3 from the negative 3, we're dividing it, that is, we're left with minus 1. Okay, so the next step in factor by grouping is to factor out what is common in both sides. So if you take a look at it, you can see that there is an x minus 1 in both parts. So I'm going to take an x minus... Alright, so let's take that x minus 1 out now. And we're going to be left with, from both parts, so from the first part we're left with the x squared. And then from the second part over here, we're going to be left with a plus 3. So we still have it all set equal to 0. So we get x minus 1 equals 0. And x squared plus 3 equals 0. Which gives us x equals 1, x squared equals negative 3 when we subtract it over, and then we just need a square root. So square root both sides, get x equals the square root, plus or minus the square root, of negative 3. And the square root of any negative number is I. So we're going to have x equals plus or minus I square root 3. Then we have this 1 here, and way up here, should have got an answer for that one. That will be x equals negative 3. So all of the answers that we have will be negative 3, 1, and plus or minus I root 3. I'm sorry this program here has not been working. This app has been giving me a hard time, which has made this video a little choppy. I'm sorry if I repeat myself in there. Those are your answers. Okay, given the function in its graph, we're going to find all zeros. Zeros are where f of x is equivalent to 0. That's what that's saying. So we need to find a root in the graph. All right, basically, where is it crossing the x-axis? That's all we're looking for. And here's a spot, and there's a spot. So we're going to have x equals negative 2, x equals negative 1, which means the factor must have been x plus 2 and x plus 1. Remember, those were factors that were set equal to 0. That's where they came from. So those are our factors. Now we're going to do some long division. I don't know about you, but I'm going to choose the easy one. So I am going to divide with x plus 1 and come up with the rest of the problem. All right, so we need to divide by x plus 1. I'm just going to toss those out of my way. All right, x plus 1. A little more long division practice, which is just tons of fun. Everybody loves it. We have x to the 4th plus our 3x cubed plus 6x squared plus 12x plus 8. All right, and I chose the x plus 1 simply because it'd be easier to do the multiplication. So I need to multiply to make it become an x to the 4th, so I'm going to multiply by x cubed. That is going to give me x to the 4th and then plus my x cubed. I don't like subtraction, so I'm going to change the signs. That way I don't screw this up. When we add the negatives, they cancel, and then 3 plus a negative 1 is going to be our 2x cubed. All right, need to multiply again. So we have to multiply to make a 2x to the 3rd. So we're going to multiply by 2x squared. It's going to be a positive 2x squared. And that's going to give us, sorry, I forgot to bring down the 6x squared here. So, and multiply to get the 2x squared, that gives us our 2x cubed now. And then 2x squared times 1 is just our 2x squared. Again, we don't like subtraction, so we're going to take and switch the signs. All right, scribble that out. Subtract. Now it works. This thing's hilarious. So we get 6 minus 2, which is pretty easy. That works out to just be a nice 4x squared. Bring down the 12 this time, I'll remember. All right, again, we're going to multiply. The multiplying this time, we want to have a positive 4x squared, so we need to multiply by 4x. It's a positive 4x. So that gives us 4x squared. 4x times 1 is pretty easy. That's just our 4x. Again, we don't like subtraction, so we add the opposite. Right, on this problem, not a big deal since everything was plus. We probably could have just subtracted, and it would have been just fine. Anyways, subtract and get 8x, or add, 12 plus negative 4, 8x plus 8. Again, multiply, this time to make 8x from x, we're multiplying by 8. That gives us 8x plus 8. When we subtract, we end up with 0. It works out well because Well, it should. We're supposed to be able to find the rest of the factors. So now we need to slide on over so we can factor the problem that we have up there. So I've copied over the x cubed plus 2x squared plus 4x plus 8. All right, should all be equal to 0. The other factor that we have here, and I guess I should totally include that, would be the x plus 1 that we talked about already. So x plus 1 is one of the other factors. And now we need to, so x plus 1 is going to stay. And now we need to factor. All right, you see that you have a couple of terms here. It looks like 1, 2, 3, 4 terms. This is going to be your factor by grouping. So I'm going to have factors here and here, something I can pull out, the largest thing possible. So in the first part, the largest thing I can take out of my x cubed and my 2x squared is an x squared. So I do a GCF. I'm dividing that out. That's what GCF means, greatest common factor. You're pulling it out. So we're left with an x plus 2. So what can we take out of both the 4x and the 8? We can take out a 4. So we pull that 4 out, and conveniently, and not coincidentally at all, we're left with an x plus 2 inside. That's supposed to happen. So now you're supposed to look at it and say, what's common? Well, both parts here have an x plus 2. So now I'm going to pull that x plus 2 out. So again, I'm going to copy my x plus 1. I'm going to pull x plus 2 out away from both parts. When I do that, I'm left with a part over here, the x squared, and a part over here next to the plus 4. So I pulled out my x plus 2, and now I just need to write the part that's left. X squared from the left side, plus 4 from the right side. Okay, I don't need to have those massive brackets anymore. I can just solve from there. So I'm going to get x equals negative 1, x equals negative 2, and then x squared plus 4 equals 0. To solve that, we subtract 4 over. We square root both sides. Don't forget, when you square root, to get rid of that squared value right here, you have to add a plus or a minus in front. Goes right here and here. We know the square root of negative 4. That works out really nice. Square root of negative 4 is 2i. So we now have our roots. All right. Why would it work? Okay, let's just move them both up. Oh, great. There we go. So we have x equals negative 1, negative 2, and a positive and negative 2i. Now, since this graph, I'm going to try and move this up, and I'm sure it's just not going to work very well, but here goes. And, well, we can see the graph. All right, well, good. So, since we have this graph right here, and we had the two roots right off the bat, the x plus 1 right here, and the x plus 2 from right here, okay? Those two factors, I apologize, from those two roots. Since we had two of them, we technically could have cheated this problem again and done long division right here instead of doing all this factoring. I could have taken this x cubed plus 2x squared plus 4x plus 8 and divided by the other factor, which is x plus 2. That rarely happens, and I don't really care to do long division. I'd rather do the factoring that I did over here. But if you're a person that likes to do long division and you see they give us those two factors, you can do long division twice and come up with your answer. Makes it much easier if you don't like the factoring. Odds are pretty good, though, that on the test you won't see two roots right there, so you won't have two factors, and you'll have to do this type of factoring afterwards. Notice there are 4 answers. It was power of x to the 4th, and we had 4 answers, negative 1, negative 2, and plus or minus 2i. Now, those imaginary answers don't show up on the graph because, well, they can't, they're imaginary.